Okay, so this time what we're going to discuss, of course, is the capacity planning, no? So it's hard to plan how much capacity you're going to have or need for life, no, for areas of life, no. Many people adjust as they go, making room where they can, no. Well, this is somewhat unfortunate truth of life. So it doesn't have to be one in business. Though there's no way to know for sure how much product to order in 6 months, of how many workers you'll need in a year, and there is something that can get you as choose to these answers as you can possibly be: the capacity planning. We need to accept the fact that capacity planning is the process of deciphering, no, how much research you're going to need to meet demand, and the demand can be for any unit of time, the coming week, next season, or even in a year's time. So to give us more details about the capacity planning, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay po, thank you, Dean. So for tonight, I'll be discussing chapter 4 of our syllabus, which is capacity planning. Okay, so we have quite a lot of sections here, and I do hope you won't get bored with my session. Anyway, let's start. So what is capacity planning? Okay, so the word capacity means upper limit or ceiling on the load that an operating unit can handle. So as for capacity planning, it refers to the process of determining how much resource you're going to need to meet demand. This sounds sorry. This sounds easy, but there are some difficulties in actually measuring capacity in certain cases. So up to this point, we have been using a general definition of capacity. Although it is functional, can be refined into two useful definitions of capacity. So we have design capacity and effective capacity. So the definitions here are very mathematic. So to make it somehow shallow, design capacity is the theoretical maximum output a system may produce in a specific time frame under perfect circumstances. So on the other hand, effective capacity is the maximum outcome that the firm can produce with a particular period based on the constraints such as quality, handling of materials, and delay. So meaning to say it is the real outcome of the firm. Okay. So we will discuss more of this on the following section. Okay, so there are three key inputs to capacity planning. So first, the kind of capacity that will be needed. So this depends on the products and services that management intends to produce or provide. Next, how much will be needed and when it will be needed. So these two can be answered by forecast key inputs. Okay, so operations management has a lot of processes, and is this capacity planning even important? So let's see. Okay, of course, it's important. No? The main goal of capacity planning is to achieve a match between the long-term supply capabilities of an organization and the predicted level of long-term demand. So organizations become involved in capacity planning to anticipate or handle changes in demand, uh, changes in technology, changes in environment, and perceive threats and opportunities. So for now, let's discuss some of its importance. So first, capacity decisions have a real impact on the ability of the organization to meet future demands for products and services. No? Having capacity to satisfy demand can often allow a company to take advantage of tremendous benefits. So for example, in a quick service restaurant, QSR, I used to work there sa marketing. So alam namin na mataas ang demand sa cold desserts or drinks kapag summer. So ang basis namin is the sales from previous years or on same season. So since aware na ang store for this demand, i-adjust na lang yung stocks para sa dessert. And aside from that, i-ensure na masunod yung scheduled maintenance ng mga aircon kasi isa din yun sa reasons ng pagpunta ng mga customers sa store during summer. So with that, the store will be able to get the most out of this expected demand, diba? The store will be able to accommodate the demand, sell more, and get higher profit. Okay, next, the capacity decisions affect operating costs. So ideally, capacity and demand requirements will be matched. So it tends to minimize operating costs. Next, capacity is usually a major determinant of initial cost. So typically, the greater the capacity of the productive unit, the greater its cost. So this does not necessarily imply a one-for-one relationship. No, larger units tend to cost proportionately less than smaller units. Okay, next. Capacity decisions often involve long-term commitment of resources and the fact that once they are implemented, those decisions may be difficult or impossible to modify without incurring major costs. Next, capacity decisions can affect competitiveness. So if a firm has excess capacity or can quickly add capacity, that fact may serve as a barrier to entry by other firms. So capacity can affect delivery speed, which can be a competitive advantage. Next, capacity affects the ease of management. Okay, having appropriate capacity makes management easier than when capacity is mismatched. So that's why, as mentioned earlier, our main goal is in doing capacity planning is to meet the demand. Okay, 7, globalization has increased the importance and the complexity of capacity decisions. So far-flung supply chains and distant markets add to the uncertainty about capacity needs. And lastly, it is necessary to plan for them or for the business owners far in advance because capacity decisions often involve substantial financial and other resources. For example, it may take years for a new power generating plant to be constructed and become operational. No? However, this increases the risk that the designated amount of capacity will not match actual demand when the capacity becomes available. Okay, so next, how can we measure capacity? Okay. So as mentioned in 4.1, no, capacity planning can be refined into 2 useful definitions. So it's either design or effective capacity. So again, design capacity is the theoretical output, while effective capacity is the real maximum outcome. So effective capacity is always less than design capacity owing to realities of changing product mix, the need for periodic maintenance of equipment, lunch breaks, coffee breaks, problems in scheduling and balancing operations, and similar circumstances. No? So actual output cannot exceed effective capacity and is often less because of machine breakdowns, absenteeism, shortages of materials and quality problems, so as well as factors that are outside the control of the operations managers. So before we go to the the computation, so maybe you're wondering who's setting or giving or deciding what's the design capacity. So basically the people who literally designed the machine equipment, did the floor plan. So for example, in a fast food setup, a frying vat for chicken can only accommodate 12 pieces of chicken per run. So that's the design capacity. Based on personal, so this is to ensure that no oil will spill or during the cooking process, no, or walang undercook or overcook, no. So based on personal experience, we had taste test sessions for this, no, as part of the training, and the theoretical idea no, 12 pieces per run is somehow correct. So hindi ka pwedeng lumagpas doon or else magkakaroon ng mga undercooked chickens or may mga uneven portions doon. So, well, not for all instances naman, but if we want to maintain the level of quality na chicken na we want to serve, then we should follow that design capacity. So, same with seating capacity ng store. Seating capacity, kung sino yung floor nag-design ng floor plans, yung nag-design nun, siya yung nagsasuggest na ito yung capacity nung restaurant or no party area. So, based on this experience namin before sa store, so the design capacity for a usual party area is 30 guests only, no? Or for bigger stores, they have party area that can accommodate 50 or 100 guests. So that's the ideal maximum seating capacity. So yes, additional guests can come in. We can add tables and chairs inside the party area, but the room will be crowded and might become uncomfortable for the other guests kung ipipilit. So there's an instance wherein we have this persistent client and nag-insist na kung pwede 150 guests. So we tried, no? We tried to accommodate that request. So we included or we added some tables and chairs inside the party area that can accommodate only 100 guests. So pinilit yung 150 guests. So it was kind of disaster in terms of comfort ng ibang guests kasi crowded. We planned days before that, and in terms of products, food, we were able to meet the head count ng guests, but we also have enough staffing, but we still had problems in terms of service kasi crowded yung area and our staff, so we're not able to serve customers efficiently, and the host wasn't able to facilitate games kasi hindi niya ma-maximize yung space. Yeah, so ayun, share lang. So yeah, so we have a table here. This provides some examples of commonly used measures of capacity. So these different measures of capacity are useful in defining two measures of system effectiveness. So we have here efficiency and utilization. So we cannot just rely with design capacity alone or effective capacity alone. No. So these two should be used to come up with the efficiency and utilization computation. Okay. Moving on. All right. So yeah, efficiency is the ratio of actual output to effective capacity. Capacity utilization or utilization is the ratio of actual output to design capacity. So maximizing utilization helps ensure that the company gets the most from their investment in machineries, people, etc., and identify scheduling or maintenance problems that can leave non-productive gaps in the operations. On the other hand, efficiency helps to quickly identify problems with routings, training, costing. So both are equally important metrics. So in our example here, we have given design capacity of 50 trucks per day with effective capacity of 40 trucks per day. So yung 10 difference sa 50 and 40 na minus na, let's say due to one staff is newly hired, kaya may ganong difference, kaya naging 40 na lang effective capacity niya. And actual output is 36 trucks per day. So based on the computation using the given formula, efficiency is 90% and utilization is 72%. So the efficiency rate of 90% is kind of pretty good, right? Sorry. However, for the utilization, which is at 70%, 72%, which is kind of less impressive, although probably more meaningful because this is based on the actual output. So at first, you might think of just increasing actual output, diba? But since effective capacity here acts as a lid on actual output, the real key to improving utilization is to increase effective capacity by correcting quality problems, maintaining equipment in good operating condition, fully training employees, and fully utilizing bottleneck equipment. So based sa assumption natin kanina, no, kaya 40 lang yung effective capacity kasi may isang newly hired na staff. So para ma-increase yung effective capacity, the company or the business can conduct training para sa mga newly hired staffs, no, para mas mapataas yung effective capacity nila. Okay, so therefore increasing utilization depends on being able to increase effective capacity, and this requires a knowledge of what is constraining effective capacity. Okay, so moving on, let's now have the determinants of effective capacity. Okay, So for design capacity, we mentioned earlier that it was set by the one who created the machine, did the floor plan, conceptualized a certain process, right? Kasi alam nila kung paano nag-work yun. Okay? On the other hand, we have here some determinants of effective capacity, kung ano yung mga nilaless natin dun sa design capacity and mag-come up sa value ng effective capacity. Okay, so first we have facilities. So the design of facilities, including size and provision for expansion, is the key here. No, location factors such as transportation costs, distance to market, labor supply, energy sources, and room for expansion are also important. In addition, layout of work area often determines how smoothly work can be performed. So we have actually professionals who specializes in designing floor plans, no, to achieve operations target efficiency. Uh, and in addition to that, we also have the environmental factors such as heating, lighting, and ventilation. Those also play a significant role in determining whether personnel can perform effectively or whether they must struggle to overcome poor design characteristics. No? So this is important because a staff won't be able to work properly if he or she feels some discomfort. Next, we also have product and service factors. Okay, so product or service design can have a tremendous influence on capacity. So for example, when items are similar, the ability of the system to produce those items is generally much greater than when successive items differ. A perfect example is a restaurant that offers a limited menu can usually prepare and serve meals at a faster rate than a restaurant with an extensive menu. So have you watched any episode of Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmare show? It's a old show na, pero a lot of restaurants that they have featured there actually have a long list of menu, thinking that the more they can offer or the wider the selection is, the better. So Gordon always highlight this, no, that they should only focus on a particular mix of products or services, no. Uh, it can be Mexican, Italian food, or fast food, or Filipino food, since different items will have different rates of outputs. And of course, it would be easier to manage, no, since you have a little limited set of ingredients to buy. Staffs not need much training to learn different cuisines, no. So the more uniform the output, the more opportunities they can do to, to standardize the methods and their materials, which leads to greater capacity. Okay, next, we have the process factors. So the quantity capability of a process is an obvious determinant of capacity. A more subtle determinant is the influence of output quality. So for instance, if quality of output does not meet standards, the rate of output will be slowed by the need for inspection and rework activities. So productivity also affects capacity. Process improvements that increase quality and productivity can result in increased capacity. Also, if multiple products or multiple services are processed in batches, the time to change over equipment settings must be taken into account. This is the reason why we do process audit and calibration, no, to know if there's a need for us to upgrade the process or incorporate technology to level up the quality of the output. Okay, next we also have human factors. Okay, so the tasks that make up a job, the variety of activities involved, the training, skills, and experience required to perform a job, all have an impact on the potential and actual output. In addition, employee motivation has a very basic relationship to capacity, as do um, absenteeism and labor turnover. Next, we also have the policy. So management policy can also affect capacity by allowing or not allowing capacity options such as overtime or second or third shifts. Next, we also have operational factors. So scheduling problems may occur when an organization has differences in equipment capabilities among alternative pieces of equipment or differences in job requirements. So inventory stocking decisions, late deliveries, purchasing requirements, acceptability of purchased materials and parts, and quality inspection and control procedures also can have impact on effective capacity. Inventory shortages of even one component of an assembled item can cause a temporary halt to assembly operations until the components become available. So this can have a major impact on effective capacity. Thus, insufficient capacity in one area can affect overall capacity. So, another example lang sa QSR setup again. No? So, there's a time when one of the frying bat, yung pang French fries pa talaga, malfunctioned and the store wasn't able to serve fries for almost the whole day. So, this particular QSR, yung fries is one of the best seller na store. Parang flagship product niya to. And imagine the frustration of the customers kapag sinabing fries, especially kapag bata. Imagine the loss, yun sa profit loss for not being able to sell fries for the whole day. Imagine the upsell opportunities na nawala because of that. So, what the management did to solve that, no, is the machine got fixed after 8 hours, and the main reason why it malfunctioned was due to improper cleaning of the vat. I just don't know the technicalities of it, but it's the major cause daw as per the technician. So, remember yung computation natin ng efficiency and utilization kanina. It showed na we should increase the effective capacity, no, diba? Instead of focusing on the actual input. So for this particular scenario, what the management did to address the issue was to do machine handling recalibration sa staffs and for the managers in charge for the shift na on the shift na they need to ensure that staffs are doing the correct machine handling. So instead na bumili ng bagong machine or magpalit ng staff, no, which can also add sa cost kasi magte-training ka na naman, panibagong training ng tao, no? They have to, ensure or mag-retraining na lang, recalibration na lang ng proper handling ng machine. Okay. Para hindi na maulit yung same instance. And believe me, ayaw na namin maulit yun. Okay, next. So, supply chain factors. So, supply chain factors must be taken into account in capacity planning if substantial capacity changes are involved. Key questions include here like what impact will the changes have on suppliers, warehousing, transportation, and distributors. If capacity will be increased, will these elements of the supply chain will be able to handle the increase? Another thing is if capacity is to be decreased, what impact will be the loss of business have on these elements of supply chain? So yeah, we have to take into consideration of that. And lastly, we have the external factors. So product standards, especially minimum quality and performance standards, can restrict management's options for increasing and using capacity. So there's like pollution standards on products and equipment often reduce effective capacity as does paperwork required by government regulatory agencies by engaging employees in non-productive activities. So a similar effect occurs when a union contract limits the number of hours and type of work an employee may do. Okay, so let's now discuss how to formulate a strategy for capacity planning. Right. So there are three primary strategies, for capacity planning. So first, we have leading. Then we also have following and tracking. So a leading capacity strategy builds capacity in anticipation of future demand increases. So if capacity increases involve a long lead time, this strategy may be the best option. A following strategy, on the other hand, builds capacity when demand exceeds current capacity. Okay. As for the tracking strategy, it is somehow similar to following strategy, but it adds capacity on relatively small increments to keep pace with increasing demand. Okay. So an organization typically bases its capacity strategy on assumptions and predictions about long-term demand patterns, technological changes, and the behavior of its competitors. So this typically involves growth rate and variability of demand, the cost of building and operating facilities of various sizes, the rate and direction of technological innovation, the likely behavior of competitors, and the availability of capital and other inputs. Okay, so in some instances, a decision may be made to incorporate a capacity cushion, which is an amount of capacity in excess of expected demand when there is some uncertainty about demand. So capacity cushion is equal to capacity minus expected demand. So typically, the greater the degree of demand uncertainty, the greater the amount of cushion used. Sorry. Organizations that have started products or services generally have smaller capacity cushions. Cost and competitive priorities are also key factors. So an example of capacity cushion, no, for example, the expected monthly demand ni IKEA is 500,000 worth of goods, pero they can produce as much as 550,000. So yung difference na 10% or yung 50,000 is the capacity cushion. So advantage nito is habang mataas ang demand nila sa market, mas marami silang kayang i-supply sa mga customer. Downside naman nito is kapag bumaba ang demand and hindi nabenta yung extra units agad, well, of course, matitengga sa warehouse yung items and eventually if hindi talaga ma-dispose, kailangan nila ibenta at lower price. Okay? So, since we have we now have an idea on the 3 primary strategies in capacity planning, let's now discuss the actual steps in capacity planning. So 1, estimate future capacity requirements. So this can be done by using historical data, no, such as sales report from past months or last year. So going back to QSR setup again, well, there's an option in the POS dun sa cashier, yun, point of sale nila, where you can get a number of customers na bumili dun sa store at specific day part or specific date. So with that, you can check which day part yung mas maraming customer, breakfast ba, lunch, or dinner, or which day mas maraming customer. Is it weekend? Or is there particular days during weekdays na malakas? Or is there a certain date na ang taas ng demand? Tapos yung pala holiday pala kaya maraming demand. So with that, no, mas magiging accurate yung estimation sa pag-order ng stocks for those days na anticipated yung high volume ng customer. So see, this kind of information can actually help the manager do an estimate future capacity requirement. Next, evaluate existing capacity and facilities and identify gaps. So is the existing design capacity works for the demand that you currently have? No, another thing, is there a way for you to bridge that gap? Like, for example, getting another equipment to double the design capacity that you currently have, no? So this types of evaluation based on the current business capacity is important in choosing the right strategy. Okay, next, identify alternatives for meeting requirements. So same with the evaluation, no? How can we bridge the gaps that we notice? We need to come up with alternatives to meet the demand requirements. Okay, 4, conduct financial analysis of each alternative. Okay, so you were able to note what are the gaps, even come up with the alternatives to bridge those gaps. So next is to assess the cost of each alternative and its impact on your profit, investment, and business efficiency. So in section 4.11 later, we will discuss some ways on how we can evaluate alternatives, which also includes financial analysis methods. Next, assess key qualitative issues for each alternative. So aside from getting the advantages of the alternatives, and its accompanying costs, you also have to assess any issues, if there's any, related to the certain alternative that you have. Next, select the alternative to pursue that will be best in the long term. So at this stage, you were able to weigh all the considerations among your alternatives. So it's time for you to choose which one to implement. Okay, so implement the selected alternative. At this stage, you also have to do some knowledge transfers if needed, especially if the chosen alternative will involve staff's participation in the actual process. And lastly, monitor results. Of course, you have to assess if the selected alternative is effective or not. So you have to set a specific timeline where you can do the observations, take notes, and see if there's a need for you to do some improvement or to use other alternative. All right. So now we already know how to measure capacity, formulate a strategy, and the steps in capacity planning. Let's now discuss the requirements of forecasting capacity. Okay, so capacity planning decision involves involves both long-term and short-term considerations. So because the time intervals covered by each of these categories can vary significantly from industry to industry, it would be misleading to put times on the intervals. However, the distinction will serve as a framework within which to discuss capacity planning. So long-term capacity needs require forecasting demand over a time horizon and then converting those forecasts into capacity requirements. So figure 5.1 here illustrates some basic demand patterns that might be identified by a forecast. In addition to basic patterns, there are some complex patterns such as combination of cycles and trends. So when trends are identified, the fundamental issues are first, how long the trend might persist because few things, last forever. And second, the slope of the trend. So if the cycles are identified, interest focuses on the approximate length of the cycles and two, the amplitude of the cycles. Okay, so on the other hand, short-term capacity needs are less concerned with cycles or trends than with seasonal variations and other variations from average. These deviations are particularly important because they can place a severe strain on a system's ability to satisfy demand at some times and yet result in idle capacity or other times. So an organization can identify seasonal patterns using standard forecasting techniques. Although commonly thought of as an annual fluctuations, seasonal variations are also reflected in monthly, weekly, and even daily capacity requirements. So we have here a table and provides some examples of items that tend to exhibit seasonal demand patterns. So when time intervals are too short to have seasonal variations in demand, the analysis can often describe the variations by probability, sorry, okay, by probability distribution such as normal or uniform. Okay. So, yeah, a necessary piece of information is the capacity requirements of products that will be processed. No? So to get this information, one must have reasonably accurate demand forecast for each product and know the standard processing time per unit for each product, the number of workdays per year, and the number of shifts that will be used. So we have here an example on how to calculate the units of capacity needed. Okay, so based on the given, we have here 5,800 hours processing time needed and a total of 2,000 hours per year. So using the formula, sorry, the total units of capacity needed is 2.9 machines. Okay. So next, capacity planning sounds easy, especially if we are managing products. But how about capacity planning for services? Okay, so while our discussion relates generally to capacity planning for both goods and services, it is important to note that capacity planning for services can present special challenges due to the nature of services. So there are very important factors in planning service capacity. Okay, so we have three. First, there might be a need to be near customers. This is actually obvious. Convenience for customers is often an important aspect of service. So generally, a service must be located near customers. Next, inability to store services. So capacity also must be matched with the timing of demand. So unlike goods, services cannot be produced in one period and then stored for use in a later period, right? So similarly, inventories of goods allow customers to immediately satisfy wants, whereas a customer who wants a service may have to wait. So this can result in a variety of negatives, for an organization that provides the service. So thus, speed of delivery or customer waiting time becomes a major concern in service capacity planning. Okay, lastly, we have the degree of volatility of demand. So demand volatility presents problems for capacity planners. No? Demand volatility tends to be higher for services than for goods, not only in timing of demand, but also in the amount of time required for to service individual customers, no? Or to serve individual customers. So for example, uh, banks tend to experience high volumes of demand on certain days of the week, and the number and nature of transactions tend to vary substantially for different individuals. No? So then a wide range of social, cultural, and even weather factors can cause major peaks and valleys in demand. So the fact that services can't be stored means service systems cannot turn into inventory to smooth demand requirements on the system the way goods producing systems are able to. So instead, service planners have to devise other methods of coping with demand volatility and cyclical demand. So for example, to cope with peak demand periods, planners might consider hiring extra workers, hiring temporary workers, or outsourcing some or all of your service, or using pricing and promotion to shift some demand to slower periods. No? So in some instances, um, yeah, demand management strategies can be used to offset capacity limitations. No? So we have can do pricing, promotions, discounts, and similar tactics. So just to help, to shift some demand away from the peak periods and into slow periods, allowing organizations to achieve a closer match in supply and demand. Okay. So given the process in doing the capacity planning and the challenges, especially for planning for services, should a business do capacity planning internally, or should they just get someone to do it for them? So let's take a look on some considerations whether to do it in-house or have it outsourced. Okay. So once capacity requirements have been determined, the organization must decide whether to produce a good or provide a service itself, or to outsource from another organization. So many organizations buy parts or contract out services for a variety of reasons now. So among those factors are, okay, first, available capacity. So if an organization has available equipment, necessary skills, and time, it often makes sense to produce an item or perform a service in-house. The additional cost would be relatively small compared with those required to buy items or subcontract services. No. On the other hand, outsourcing can increase capacity and flexibility. Number two, we have expertise. So if a firm lacks the expertise to do a job satisfactorily, buying might be a reasonable alternative, right? Next, we have quality considerations. So firms that specialize can usually offer higher quality than an organization can attain itself. So unique quality requirements or the desire to closely monitor quality may cause an organization to perform a job itself. Sorry. Next, the nature of demand. So when demand for an item is high and steady, the organization is often better off doing the work itself. However, wide fluctuations in demand or small orders are usually better handled by specialists who are able to combine others from multiple sources. No, uh, sorry. Yeah, so this results in higher volume and tends to offset individual buyer fluctuations. Next, cost. So any cost savings achieved from buying or making must be weighed against the preceding factors. So cost savings might come from the item itself or from transportation cost savings. If there are fixed costs associated with making an item that cannot be reallocated, if the service or product is outsourced, then that has to be recognized in the analysis. So outsourcing may help a firm avoid incurring fixed costs. And lastly, we have risk. So buying goods or services may entail considerable risk. So loss of direct control over operations, knowledge sharing, and the possible need to disclose proprietary information are three risks. And liability can be tremendous risk, if the products or services of other companies cause harm to customers or the environment, as well as damage to an organization's reputation. Reputation can also be damaged if the public discovers that a supplier operates with substandard working conditions. Okay. So in some cases, a firm might choose to perform part of the work itself and let others handle the rest in order to maintain flexibility and to hedge against loss of a subcontractor. If part or all of the work will be done in-house, capacity alternatives will need to be developed. Okay, next. In 4.5 earlier, we discussed how to formulate a strategy and the steps in capacity planning. So on this section, let's discuss how we develop strategies based on some business factors. Okay. So there are a number of ways to enhance development of capacity strategies. So first is to design flexibility into systems. So the long-term nature of many capacity decisions and the risk inherent in long-term forecasts suggest potential benefits from designing flexible systems. For example, provision for future expansion in the original design of a structure frequently can be obtained at a small price compared to what it would cost to remodel an existing structure that did not have such a provision. Next, take, take stage of next is to take stage of life cycle into account. So capacity requirements are often closely linked to the stage of the life cycle that the product or service is in. So at the introduction phase, it can be difficult to determine both the size of the market and the organization's eventual share of that market. So therefore, organizations should be cautious in making large or inflexible capacity investments. In growth phase, the overall market may experience rapid growth. Uh, However, the real issue here is the rate at which the organization's market share grows, which may be more or less than the market rate, depending on the success of the organization's strategies. Okay. In the maturity phase, the size of the market levels off and organizations tend to have stable market shares. So organizations may still be able to increase profitability by reducing costs and making full use of capacity. Okay. And in the decline phase, an organization is faced with underutilization of capacity due to declining demand. So organization may eliminate the excess capacity by selling it or by introducing new products or services. An option that is sometimes used in manufacturing is to transfer capacity to a location that has lower labor costs, which allows the organization to continue to make a profit on the product for for a while longer. Sorry. Okay. Next. Okay. Take a big picture approach to capacity changes. So when developing capacity alternatives, it is important to consider how parts of the system interrelate. Okay, so changes in capacity inevitably have an impact on an organization's supply chain. No? So suppliers may require time to adjust to their capacity. So working with supply chain partners on capacity increase plans is critical. So that includes suppliers, distributors, and transporters as well. The risk of failing to consider the big picture is that the system will become unbalanced or there will be a bottleneck operation. Okay. Next, be prepared to deal with capacity chunks. So capacity increases is often acquired in fairly large chunks rather than smooth increments, no? Making it difficult to achieve a match between desired capacity and feasible capacity. So for example, the desired capacity of a certain operation may be 55 units per hour, but suppose the machine that they use can only produce 40 units per hour. So uh one machine itself would cause capacity to be 15 units per hour short of what is needed, no? But two machines would result in an excess capacity of 25 units per hour. Okay, so that's capacity chunks. Next is an attempt to smooth out capacity requirements, no? So unevenness in capacity requirements also can create certain problems. No? We can trace the unevenness in demand for products and services to a variety of sources, such as seasonal variations and variability in demand. Next, identify the optimal operating level. So production units typically have an ideal or optimal level of operation in terms of unit cost of output. So at the ideal level, cost per unit is the lowest for that production unit. If the output rate is less than the optimal level, increasing the output rate will result in decreasing average unit cost. Okay. And lastly, choose a strategy if expansion is involved. So consider whether incremental expansion or single step is more appropriate. No? Factors include competitive pressures, market opportunities, cost, and availability of funds, disruption of operations, and training requirements. Also, you also have to decide whether to lead or follow competitors. Leading is more risky, but it may have greater potential for rewards. Okay, so aside from the challenges that we have discussed in 4.7, which is specifically for services, we also have some constraints that we need to manage in order for us to achieve successful capacity planning. Okay. So first we have market. So it can be insufficient demand, resource. Another one is resource. So there might be too little or one or more resources. For example, shortage. So workers, equipment, or space. Next, we have materials. So we have insufficient amount of materials on hand. Next, financial. So it can be the business has insufficient funds, no? Next, supplier. So having insufficient or unreliable suppliers, long lead time, and substandard quality in products, no, from the suppliers. Next, we have knowledge or competency. Can be there are some skills missing. Then sa staffs more, or they need more training, no, to level up. And lastly, we have policy. So there are some laws or regulations that interfere. Okay, so the said constraint issues can be actually be resolved by using the following 5 steps. Well, resolve or maybe somehow manageable. No. First, identify the most pressing constraint. So if it can easily be overcome, then do so and return to step 1 for the next constraint. Otherwise, proceed to step 2, which is change the operation to achieve the maximum benefit given the constraint. This may be a short-term solution. Next, make sure other portions of the process are supportive of the constraint. No? Next, explore and evaluate ways to overcome constraints. So this will depend on the type of constraint. So for example, if demand is too low, advertising or price change may be an option. If capacity is the issue, working overtime, purchasing new equipment, and outsourcing are possible options. If additional funds are needed, then working to provide cash flow, borrowing and issuing stocks or bonds may be options. Another thing, if suppliers are a problem, work with them, find more desirable suppliers, or do in-house. Or if knowledge or skills is the problem, then seek training or consultants, or maybe outsource. And if the problem is the law or regulations, uh, working with lawmakers or regulators may be an option. Then last, repeat the process until the level of constraints is acceptable. Okay. So next, on this section, we will discuss the alternatives that we have in capacity planning and evaluating each of them based on business's nature and needs. So first, we have cost volume analysis. Cost volume analysis focuses on relationships between cost, revenue, and volume output. The purpose of cost volume analysis is to estimate the income of an organization under different operating conditions. So the use of this technique now requires identification of of all costs related to the production of a given product. No? So these costs are then designated as fixed costs or variable costs. So fixed costs tend to remain constant regardless of volume of output. On the other hand, variable costs may vary directly with the volume of output. Okay, so cost volume analysis can be a valuable tool for comparing capacity alternatives if certain assumptions are satisfied. So these are the assumptions. Okay, one product is involved, everything produced can be sold. The variable cost per unit is the same regardless of the volume. Fixed costs do not change with volume changes, or they are step changes. The revenue per unit is the same regardless of volume, and revenue per unit exceeds variable cost per unit. Okay. Next, we have the financial analysis. So financial analysis is used to analyze whether an entity is stable, solvent, liquid, or profitable enough to warrant a monetary investment. So operations personnel need to have the ability to do financial analysis. A problem that is universally encountered by managers is how to allocate scarce funds. So a common approach is to use financial analysis to rank investment proposals, taking into account the time value of money. So two important terms in financial analysis are cash flow and present value. So cash flow refers to the difference between the cash received from sales, so it can be goods or service or other sources, and the cash outflow for labor, materials, overhead, and taxes. While present value expresses in current value the sum of all future cash flows of an investment proposal. So there are the three most commonly used methods of financial analysis are payback, present value, and internal rate of return. So payback is widely used method that focuses on the length of time it will take for an investment to return its original cost. So payback ignores the time value of money. No? It uses its use is easier to rationalize for short term than for long term projects. Next, we have the present value method. This one summarizes the initial cost of an investment, its estimated annual cash flows, and any expected salvage value in a single value called the equivalent current value, taking into account the time value of a money, like interest rates. Lastly, we have the internal rate of return, IRR. So this method summarizes the initial cost of investment. Sorry, this method identifies the rate of return that equates the estimated future returns and the initial cost. Okay, so these techniques are appropriate when there is a high degree of certainty associated with estimates of future cash flows. So in many instances, however, no, operation managers and other managers must deal with situations better described as risky or uncertain. So when the conditions of risk or uncertainty are present, decision theory is often applied. Okay. So decision theory is helpful tool for financial comparisons of alternatives under conditions of risk or uncertainty. It is suited to capacity decisions and to a wide range of other decision managers must make. No, so it involves identifying a set of possible future conditions that could influence results, listing alternative courses of actions, and developing a financial outcome for each alternative future condition combination. Okay, next. Sorry. Yeah, so the traditional goal of queuing analysis is to balance the cost of providing a level of service capacity with the cost of customers waiting for services. So analysis of lines or waiting line analysis is often useful for designing or modifying service systems. So waiting lines have a tendency to form in a wide variety of service systems like airport ticket counters, telephone calls to a cable television company, hospital emergency rooms. Yeah. So the lines are symptoms of bottleneck operations. No? Analysis is useful in helping managers choose a capacity level that will be cost effective through balancing the cost of having customers wait with the cost of providing additional capacity. It can aid in the determination of expected costs for various levels of service capacity. Lastly, we have the simulation alternative. So this one is a useful tool for evaluating what if scenarios. Okay, so we have now reached the last topic of our chapter, which is the operation strategy. So let's quickly take a look on how operation managers do not to manage capacity planning. Okay, so these are some of the strategies that operation managers do to manage capacity. Okay, so the strategic implications of capacity decisions can be enormous, no, impacting all areas of organization. So from an operations management standpoint, capacity decision establish a set of conditions within which operations will be required to function. So hence it is extremely important to include input from operations management people in making capacity decisions. So first, flexibility. Flexibility can be a key issue in capacity decisions, no? Although flexibility is not always an option, particularly in capital-intensive industries. However, where if possible, no, flexibility allows an organization to be agile. So that is responsive to changes in the marketplace. Also, it reduces to to a certain extent the dependence on a long range forecast to accurately predict demand. And flexible. Another thing is that the flexibility makes it easier for organizations to take advantage of technological and other innovations. So maintaining excess capacity, like capacity cushion, may provide a degree of flexibility, but at added cost. Okay. So some organizations use a strategy of maintaining a capacity cushion for the purpose of blocking entry into the market by new competitors. So the excess capacity enables them to produce at lower cost than what new competitors can. So we have also mentioned this as part of 4.5 strategy formulation earlier. No? However, such strategy means higher than necessary unit cost. No, we have also mentioned the pros and cons earlier, and it makes it more difficult to cut back if demand slows or to shift to new product or service offerings. Okay, efficiency improvements and utilization improvements can provide capacity increase. No? Such improvements can be achieved by streamlining operations and reducing waste. So bottleneck management can be a way to increase effective capacity by scheduling non-bottleneck operations to achieve maximum utilization of bottleneck operations. Okay, so in some cases, no, where capacity expansion will be undertaken, there are two strategies for determining the timing and degree of capacity expansion. So one is the expand early strategy. So before the demand materializes, no, the intent might be to achieve economies of scale, to expand market share, or um, to preempt competitors from expanding. The risk of this strategy include an oversupply that would drive prices down and underutilized equipment that would result in higher unit costs. Okay. The other approach is the wait and see strategy. No, so it just means to expand capacity only after demand materializes. No, so its advantage include a lower chance of oversupply due to more accurate matching of supply and demand, and higher capacity utilization. The only key risk here are the key risks here are a loss of market share and the inability to meet demand if expansion requires a long time. And that actually concludes my report. Thank you everyone for listening.
Wow, thank you very much, no?